Good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Kelly Atkinson, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director and Columbus Office Administrator at Barnes & Thornburg, and I'm also Chair of CMC here at the Board of Trustees. I want to thank you to today's sponsors. We have PNC Bank and the United Way of Central Ohio. Thank you to today's forum partner, WBNS 10 TV, and to the Columbus Dispatch for their support. And today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. So let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. Writing for a Columbia University publication, Saba Rajani noted America's childcare crisis is a barrier to the future success of our country. The lack of affordable childcare is dragging down the economy and keeping would-be workers at home. It contributes to a slower recovery from the pandemic and challenges companies to find new employees. Today's speakers will unpack the childcare crisis and what Central Ohio is doing to address it. On behalf of today's sponsor, PNC Bank, please welcome Shannon Morgan, Senior Vice President and Client and Community Relations Director with PNC Bank. Shannon, podium's yours.
Thank you. It's great to see so many of you here in person, and of course, the audience on YouTube, we welcome you, and Twitter and Facebook as of today, right? So welcome to all. Also, I'm especially gratified to see so many of our early childhood education partners in the room. We appreciate the work you do every day. We're grateful for you, and thank you for caring for our children. So I think we should give a round of applause to all of our early childhood educators. All of us know that today's forum focuses on a topic that has been receiving plenty of attention. Both parents and employers agree that the need for equitable, affordable, and accessible childcare has never been greater than today. Affordable and accessible, high-quality childcare and early learning center programs are foundational to children's educational future, as well as to parents' ability to work while supporting their families and knowing that their children are cared for. Throughout the pandemic, child care centers and early childhood educators have worked tirelessly. We know you have. We hear it. To offer our families a means for opportunity for equitable child care. Child care centers must be able to staff appropriately to care for children and offer a reliable, enriching environment that benefits both children and their families. And we know, all of us know, that education is a powerful means for economic and social mobility. Children who participate in high-quality preschool are far more likely to achieve and contribute to society in their adult lives. Hopefully, it is easy to see, then, why PNC is so firmly committed to early childhood education. Investing in and advocating for high-quality early education is a logical extension to PNC's commitment as a national Main Street bank. And in that commitment, we support the communities where we live and work. That's why we launched Grow Up Great way back in 2004, focusing our philanthropic efforts to make a significant impact on early childhood education and helping prepare children from birth to age 5 for success not only in school but in life. PNC Grow Up Great is now a $500 million initiative. Our programming supports early childhood education to ensure that all children, particularly those in underserved communities, are ready for kindergarten and have a solid foundation set for their future as they grow. But unfortunately, as we're here to discuss today, too many children are getting left behind in this critical period. So now we'll welcome today's speakers. Joy Bivens, Deputy Franklin County Administrator for Health and Human Services. Elizabeth Brown, President Pro Tem, Columbus City Council. Tony Collins, President and CEO, YMCA of Central Ohio. And our host, Micah Walker, trending reporter with the Columbus Dispatch. You can read more about today's speakers in your forum flyer. Micah, we look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. As we begin, I'm sure all of you know how difficult the pandemic has been on the childcare industry, affecting so many workers, childcare directors, parents, and children. According to a recent report from the Child Care Resource Agency Action for Children, nearly 1 in 5 child care providers in Central Ohio are not confident that they'll still be open in 3 months without support. Staffing challenges loom with 50% of center-based providers experiencing staff shortages, and parents are struggling to maintain higher tuition costs. So my first question for our panelists is, we know the pandemic has worsened the strain for the childcare industry, but how did we get here? What were some issues the industry was facing even before the pandemic?
Can I go ahead and start on that one, if that's okay, Micah?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our panelists. Before I begin, I'm going to be very authentic and honest, because that's the only way I know how to be. Today is a very hard day, and to go on like it's normal would be disingenuous for me. We have 19 young babies who did not wake up today because of a tragedy. So I ask that you all bear with me as we move on, and I'm sure to my other panelists, this is hard for them as well. But this is why we're here, to advocate on behalf of young people, and I know I speak for the Franklin County Commissioners as well as my fellow panelists. Something has to change. So how do we get here? You know, pre-pandemic, we had, 68% of our publicly funded child care children that were African American, living in the lowest asset neighborhoods, that were attending early learning centers that were not star rated. 68% of those children were African American in the lowest asset neighborhoods. We also had a workforce issue and we continue to have a workforce issue where parents are not making enough, affordability is an issue, access, transportation is an issue. You know, this conundrum kind of happened together. There was this unfortunate perfect storm. And then the pandemic hit, and right when we got every center in Franklin County, I believe 97% to a star rating, you know, the pandemic hit in 2020, and then it set us back again, because we sent everyone home, and unfortunately child care centers closed. So there were several issues that impacted us pre-pandemic, particularly that relates to social terms of health in neighborhoods.
Absolutely, and thank you, Director Bivens, for grounding us. And I too want to acknowledge the tragedy that we're all sitting with here today, having lost children in Texas for no good reason. And I do think that gun violence is a huge issue that we have to talk about, and it's not what we're here today to talk about, but I think it's relevant because there is enough in our world set against our babies, set against our kids. There is enough hardship for them that we sometimes can't control. And this issue we're here to talk about today, I have the radical notion we can control it, we can do better, and we can fix it. So we can at least give our youngest kids this before they face the world, right? And what is this? What is it that families deserve? Families and children deserve? What are those characteristics of a child care system that they deserve? So high quality, affordable, accessible, right? The main things. And we haven't had that even before COVID-19. Our childcare system has existed in a pretty precarious position. We need qualified and adequately paid teachers who can use a strong curriculum, the things that the star rating system would help provide them. All families need to be able to find care where they live or where they work at the times they need it, right? Families need care not just 8 to 5, 9 to 6, et cetera. And then families need to be able to get this care affordably. And let's be clear about what affordable is. No more than 7% of their income. I don't know how many of you have heard this fact, the 7% fact, but in the same way that HUD determines what's affordable for families' rent, HHS, the Department of HHS federally has this number for what families can afford to pay for childcare, which is 7% overall, because they've got to be able to afford the roof over their head, afford transportation, afford food. And Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently referred to the child care system in America, and this would apply pre-COVID to your question, Micah, as a market failure. So I want to ground us in that starting fact as well. It is a classic market failure because families can't afford to pay more. The cost of early childhood education in Ohio is about the same as tuition at a state university, over $10,000. So families can't afford to pay more, and yet workers can't afford to subsidize the cost of care by making even lower wages, right? This leaves our system unable to deliver what children, parents, and our economy need from it. So in the long run, this is a market failure, and we have to get more money into the system. Right. That was true before COVID-19, but I think the urgency has only been magnified.
Thank you. Thanks. I want to acknowledge as well both of you leading the way in the situation we're in today. And I agree, Councilmember Brown, today this is somewhere where we can provide a solution. We can step in and make changes. I'm honored to be sitting at this table representing the Y, but more than anything, looking around this room representing our industry, right? Representing our colleagues and partners that I'm looking around the room that we work alongside every day. And I appreciate the fact that we're able to work alongside, whether it's Action for Children or Future Ready 5 or our folks who are in support of us, the United Way, our private partners at PNC, things like that, the Crane family, all of the folks in this room that help us. We all talked about this prior to the pandemic, right? We knew our business model was stretched and was not working. We knew that accessibility to affordable, high-quality childcare was based on your zip code, right? We know that. Just like a lot of things in our system today, it's based on your future, your challenges, your barriers are often associated with the zip code you're in. So we knew that, we had that challenge. We knew that the business model was broken, right? Our expenses are rising. We need to pay people who work with us, who do the work, who are the saints, the mission. I should have led by thanking our team members on the front lines and the folks who support them that are in the classrooms, that are in the care centers, that are in our early learning centers. All of those folks are doing the work, and we need to be able to pay them. But the costs have risen so much, right, that people can't afford it. And to your point, the 7% number has been used. The reality is it can't take that much of your income. You have to make sacrifices and choices that aren't acceptable. And so we saw that happening before the pandemic, and I think we all know what the pandemic has done, right? It took a broken model and broke it even further. And we knew we weren't sustainable going into this, and I was just talking to some colleagues prior to starting today. We are definitely not sustainable now. So we have to take action.
And if I can just really quick, Councilman Brown talked about the 7%. Currently, right now, parents are paying between 30% and 40% just to afford their child care. Take in consideration, they're making about $13, $11 an hour from just even for the data that I look at for publicly funded child care. You're right, we can do more, we can do better. But then there was also pre-pandemic where, as you look at the data, and thank you to our friends at Groundworks, where 72, 73% of African-American children in this county are not ready for kindergarten. 73, 74%. That means 26% of them are. And what does that mean? You all are educators. You're much smarter than me. I'm not that smart, I'll be honest with you. I got smart people around me. That means they're always catching up, right? And then their earning potential is going to be impacted, right? And how long they live, what kind of diseases, and all those things are impacted because they weren't given a fair shot from inception. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I have a question for Tony. With the YMCA being the region's largest child care provider with 52 before and after school programs, what was it like having to close down in March 2020, and what have things been like since reopening?
Well, I think the hardest part for all of us, as we were trying to struggle through all of the information that was being thrown at us regarding the pandemic, regarding COVID-19 protocols, all of the things, was trying to understand first, how can we reach in, how can we lean in and help our community? Yes, we were asked to close, but many of the folks in this room turned in and said, okay, we need to be able to provide childcare for those who have to go to work, right? For those healthcare workers, for those first responders. And so that was the first call. I mean, we immediately came together on calls and started talking about how do we provide service now, immediately? What's the crisis situation? And then, as we slowly began to reopen, it was how do we open, number one, in a safe manner? How do we make sure it's safe for the families we're serving as well as the teammates who are there doing the work? And it was constant question, right? We all remember those meetings and calls and different data and trying to understand everything to make sure we were doing it in the right manner. And today, it's just a 24-hour pivot. It's a 24-hour pivot. So you talked about what was it like. It was one of the most challenging situations any of us in this room will deal with. It was the closure. It was the denying access to families who needed us. None of us wanted to do that. It was the worrying about our staff, worrying about the families that we serve. And it was, and at the end of the day, it was an unknown. We didn't know where we were going to go the next day. Let alone, I'm not even talking about the fact that we had to, with the YMCA, and I know everybody in this room experiences, we had to lay off 3/4 of our team. And what did it do to those families? Right? So it was nothing but difficult.
And we had to teach young people how to social distance. We were still teaching them how to keep their hands to themselves, and we're telling you to keep them social distance, right?
That's right.
And Tony, were you able to hire some of those people, hire them again when things were busier again?
So thanks for the question. We have been able to reopen centers, but as we all know, many things that have been exacerbated during this time period is we're now in a place where we're not staffed, right? We had waiting lists prior to the pandemic because we were struggling to bring staff in. We've nothing but exacerbated those waiting lists. We are 30% down in enrollment, and we are 37% down in staffing. I'm confident that I could look around the room to every one of my teammates and colleagues in this room, they would answer the same data points. And I know that that's the case because I've been on calls.
And I think we try to detangle this problem, policymakers do, from every angle, and you end up in this chicken or egg situation. We don't have enough workers because we don't have enough supports for families, childcare being, among them. Well, we don't have those supports because we don't have enough workers, so how can we provide what people need to get reemployed and all these things? And I'm kind of done with thinking of it as chicken or egg, and it's just where can we start? Right? That's where we have to go. We're not ever going to be able to say unequivocally, we know that this is the root problem and then this is how it gets fixed. It's just where can we start? And I do believe that by starting in strengthening our childcare sector, in making childcare actually affordable and accessible in every neighborhood, regardless of zip code, regardless of race, a high quality slot available for your child, a parent will be able to confidently go back to work. And Director Bivens talked about or Administrator Bivens. What? Administrator Bivens?
It's Joy
okay.
today.
I talked about the Groundwork poll, and Groundwork did a really good statewide poll in Ohio to also unpack families' attitudes towards childcare, so to understand that, chicken or egg. And, they found that a majority of, I think it was mothers, actually, not just parents, of mothers said that if they could have nearly 60% of non-working or part-time working parents with young children say they would go back to work if they had that high-quality, accessible, affordable slot. Yeah. So it's critically important to just jump in where we can.
In the industry, we're on, I have a lot of human service staff, and I know some of my people that work alongside of me. Thank you for being here, Vivian and others, and Daisheen. But we're all competing for the same people right now, right? So if I was making $13 an hour pre-COVID or $11 an hour pre-COVID, and I can make $20 or $22 to increase my economic mobility status, I know I love children, I do. I love my kids when they were younger. I'm gonna be very honest with you. They're college students, post-college students now. I love them when they didn't have opinions. But
my 4-year-old has a lot of opinions.
Those
actually.
opinions, I'm like, okay. But I will tell you that they're making survival choices now, right? Why would I go back to 11, even though I love kids, but I can still make $22 an hour somewhere else, and I can move my family up the economic mobility ladder. So you're right. You're absolutely right. We have to strengthen it in so many ways, right? Because there's so many competing factors as it relates to affordability, but also strengthening the system.
If I could add two quick things. One is, you're absolutely right on the choice. We lost 4 directors last week to our local public school system, right? I have no fault to them. They advanced their situation, they got a great pay and great benefits, but that's what we're seeing happen. We're even competing amongst each other to try to keep staff and bring new staff to our teams so that we can service, so we can provide that affordable, accessible childcare. I do want to also comment too, this needs to be said, that Councilmember Brown and Director Bivens, Joy, the county and the city, you guys have stepped in. And I want to tell you that we in the Y, and I know my colleagues would agree, that we're appreciative of the work that you are doing to help support, the dollars that are coming to the table to help support our centers, our employment, but also to help support our families in finding accessible childcare. We have a lot more work to do, obviously, that's why we're here.
Absolutely.
But we do appreciate the support that's come to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a question for Joy and Elizabeth. So how has the pandemic affected childcare at the city and county level? Were you able to help childcare providers during the early days of the pandemic?
You go. So early days of the pandemic, and I know some of my, I'm going to say my street soldiers are in the room, Eric and Tanny and Jane, and I'll explain what that means later. This community was at 24% of centers that received a star or had a star, 24%. So we are we had about, at the time, 27,000 children on publicly funded childcare. 24% of the centers had a star. There was a mandate came down from the state. Every center in Franklin County must have a star. That's great. We all believe in, quality. We all believe in a strong curriculum. But this was a non-funded mandate. So I called the state director and I said, and this was a different state director, so before everyone calls the current one, I was like, you let Joy talk to you like that? I probably did regardless, but I called her at 10 o'clock and I said, hey, am I going to get at least like money for postage to let people know this thing is happening? And, she was very honest with me. So I hung up the phone and I said, we got to hit the streets. So we gathered our human service providers, we gathered our business partners, and we went door to door, knocking on the door, saying, hey, I know you are consumed with trying to unclog a toilet. I know you are consumed because your staff called off and you got to act as a teacher today. But I kind of need you to become star rated, because if you don't, these parents do not have a place to drop off their children, and you're going to lose your business, because if 70% of your business is publicly funded childcare, guess what happens? You don't have a star, it's going to close. We were on a mission. And you remember this, Jane, because you're shaking your head. You remember this. And we took Tanny around that day and wore her out. But we were on a mission to make sure that every center in Franklin County knew. And even the type B homes, or the private homes. This was not just standing centers. We went everywhere. So what we did was, the Franklin County Commissioners allocated $4 million to do a study to figure out what did parents even understand about Step Up to Quality. Because we say it in our world, but that doesn't communicate to them. What they were saying was we wanted safe, affordable, high quality, all the things we knew what Step Up to Quality mean. So we put out messaging based on those conversations, and we provided training for centers so they can become star rated. So the services that we provide in the early days was get out on the street, boots on the ground, knock on the doors, hey, I need you to become star rated, right? Also, putting out messaging that people and parents understood. Some of you even saw the commercials. Because we wanted to make sure that we were very, very intentional, ensuring that no center in Franklin County had the opportunity or missed the opportunity for closing. Because at that time, the deadline was July 2020. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of like a rule pusher. I like rules, but I think sometimes you can kind of push the envelope. So I kept calling the governor. I said, I know you're going to change the date. I know you're going to change the date. No, you're going to change. I know Kara and a couple other people kept saying, Joy, they're not going to change the date. And the governor actually sent someone to my office at the time and said, we're not changing the date. Unannounced. So, unfortunately, COVID hit and the date was changed. So But those are some of the things that we did as a county just to make sure that centers had the opportunity. And again, we were at 24% at the time. When we were done with this campaign and all this intensive groundwork that we did working with our partners, we're now at 97% of star-rated centers in this community.
And I will add to that what we've, the city and the county, since that time, there's this infrastructure in place of star-rated facilities that now have a vernacular around translating quality, affordability, and what that means to a star rating. So there's that kind of foundation. COVID rocked everyone's world, and especially the childcare industry, and the city and the county, because of the federal government stepping in and passing the American Rescue Plan, we got federal funds to be able to invest in some of the biggest needs our community had, childcare being one of them. So early on in 2020, the city got CARES Act dollars, which we used to help stabilize best we could what childcare centers were facing, because so many, given what Tony was talking about, where you couldn't even keep the doors open, or they were like just barely open, and so how could you keep your center running to be around for once kids could come back into centers? So one-time money that we were able to help stabilize centers. But then, I think these 2 years later, we've been able to do a few more creative investments that we're proud of, don't get me wrong, but we know also they're one-time investments. And I will let Joy talk about the county's work. But the city, we provided money to stabilize centers, directly to centers. We provided scholarships it's funny to talk about like a pre-K scholarship, but that's essentially what it is, scholarships for families, also serving 3-year-olds, not just 4-year-olds. And we also added additional money this summer to allow these slots to continue through to the school year, because I think most people in this room are familiar with summer learning loss. Well, that happens for our littlest ones too. When we talk about getting ready for that kindergarten readiness assessment and our abysmal rates of passage, and I do mean hours, right? Because the fact that it's all of us, these are all of our kids. So when Franklin County only has 40% passage of KRA, that's our number to own and fix. So we've also provided scholarships for the summer to keep kids learning and in the classroom for the KRA. And then I'm going to kick it back to Joy to talk about the county-specific work, which was it was really creative about what teachers need too.
So are we pre-COVID? Tony, did you want to add anything to this conversation before I go into?
No, you go for it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, go.
Good. So to Councilmember Brown's point, we did partner with the city in the beginning. I think it was the CARES Act dollar at the time. It was $7 million, assisting 450 kids who were publicly funded. Post-COVID, the commissioners came together, and I'm going to shout out my commissioners just really quick, only because they have been very diligent and intentional in this work and allowed me to even understand it from a different vernacular and space. Commissioner Brown at the time was pre-COVID. It's Commissioner Erica Crawley, Commissioner John O'Grady, and Commissioner Kevin Boyce. Commissioner Crawley was one of those people, I call her the people's champ, because before she was even a legislator, she has always advocated for children. She says all the time, every child in this community is my child. She considers that. So, when we look at the impact of what is happening with the child care system, the county commissioners came together and said, we're going to put together, with the partnership of the city, $23 million historic investment for the RISE incentive program. With our partner, we partner with our friends at Action for Children. So if you want to know more about the program, I'm going to divert you to Eric. Eric, please raise your hand, because I'm going to really butcher. I'm going to say everybody gets a free car, so make sure that you see Eric. But it was to assist parents, particularly who fell in that 142 to 300% poverty level. Currently, right now, if you were, $2,041 a month with 2 kids, you could qualify minimally. But if you make $2,050, we're going to take away your child care. So the commissioner said this is a workforce issue as well. So we're going to incentivize those parents in those centers who cannot afford, and that particularly are parents who are making $13 an hour. It provides scholarships up to $10,000 annually for 750 children in the first year and 500 children in the second year. It also takes care of an additional $10.9 million, because I'm going to mess up numbers really bad, so I have to look at them, over 2 years, and provides 6 types of incentive awards. And so it goes under, if you're a new PFCC provider, you get, I think, $1,000. If you maintain, it's $2,500. You know, step up the quality incentives are in there, but also rental assistance for the workforce in the child care system. So all these are for parents, but also is to strengthen the providers, particularly those who are working in the industry, because the same challenges that my staff are having at Job and Family Services or any other of the human service agencies are having, or wherever, McDonald's or whatever, our child care system agencies are having the same issues. So we, the commissioners, wanted to look at it from a very concentrated perspective and provide incentives and scholarships for families and centers, but also from the perspective of housing, because housing is an issue, right? Housing is an issue in this community. So if it's an issue in this community, it's definitely an issue for those child care teachers and lead teachers and directors who are not making enough to sustain. So that is a $23 million investment. It's a historic investment. I know that sometimes Commissioner Crawley says, you know, there is more to come. I don't know what that means, Mariah, but there is more to come. And I am not at liberty to talk about it. And I know everyone has this theory on what's going to happen, but I am a public servant. So if you have questions regarding the RISE incentive program, again, please see Erica Rolick or Vivian Turner. Raise your hand, Vivian. And they can assist you in identifying what dollars you may qualify for. And if you are not here, I know there's a website I'm supposed to read off, but I'll read it at the end, Micah.
I want to add on to your point, Joy, about teachers, and Joy has already talked about, you know, teacher wages, and obviously Tony has talked about sort of losing teachers or directors to another job because of that financial stability that other job can provide them, which once again, there's not enough money in the system. No one's greedy here, right? Like, there's no greed in the childcare industry. There's just not enough there. And so because of that, there's a lot of instability in the workforce, a lot of transience. But I want to talk about the other negative effect of low wages, which is not just that, you know, they're easily poachable for a better job. The other effect of low wages is what that means the teacher has on largely her mind when she's in the classroom, right? You know, if she's making average wage in Ohio for a childcare teacher, $10.67, and I say she because 95% of childcare workers are women. Disproportionately, they are women of color. So if she makes $10.67 in the classroom and she's in charge of this time in our child's life, the first 5 years, which is the most consequential period of brain development in our lives, those first 5 years are, we know this scientifically, it's fact. And we say to this teacher, I'm going to pay you poverty wages and have you be in charge of safeguarding this child's future. It is nearly an impossible situation that we've handed her, because she has on her mind her own family, her own struggle to pay rent. What sort of financial strain and stress is she bringing to work because she doesn't have that security, that system undergirding her, position outside of work. We're not these computers that like boot up when we walk into the door of our office and then power back down when we leave, right? We're 24/7 humans. Mm-hmm. There is dignity in the work that we do, and we need that foundation in order to be able to show up to work, doing our best work. And we just completely rob these precious teachers of that ability when we pay them a frankly undignified wage. And imagine the power in that classroom if we paid these teachers what they deserve, because they're choosing to be there even with these tough wages. So imagine if we dignified their work with the salary and benefits that really rewarded what they were doing for our kids, helping to build their future. I mean, it's powerful to think about the possibilities.
So I would say that, as I'm looking around the room, I'm seeing heads nod, right? Everyone agrees. Everybody's appreciative, I think, of the funding that the city and the county has brought to the table for this, even if it is temporary, right? It is impactful and it is helping, and it will continue to help. But I think I'm also looking around the room and I'm seeing shoulders tighten and stomachs turn and chests tightening because we agree, and this is the part of the business model that's broken, right? And we've known that, and we see it, and we know that there's not a measure in the future to fix it, right? So in a lot of ways, our folks are robotic because they keep coming back to work. They keep giving everything they've got to help and to care for our most important residents, community, part of our community. I think that I'm going to use this as my one time, and this is me speaking, and those of you who have been around me know that this has been my mantra. Our existing model for childcare, like housing, is unsustainable in this community, and we will have to address it. We have found sources of funds in other areas to help make them sustain. If these two things are so critical to our community, we are going to have a conversation around permanent, sustainable funding, period. So I'm going to say that. That's I was not going to leave this room until that was said, and I think you guys teed it up very well. So thank you.
But I agree with that, right? I agree with that. But I think it is, for a collective problem, it requires collective solutions. So it's everybody at the table, right? It's not just government. It's not just human services. It's not just business. It's everyone. Like, when there's a problem growing up, my grandparents had 15 children. So when there was a problem in the household, everyone came to the table to ante up on how are we going to fix the problem, right? So it is not just on the child care industry to figure out how to fix the problem as it relates to sustainability, nor is it up to the government to figure out making decisions on, we can talk about allocation of dollars, we can talk about sustainability, but we also need other partners in the room who have additional resources so that it can be truly sustainable for the future. Right? Because unfortunately, leadership changes and things change, and we want to make sure it's a collective answer.
Okay, we have time for one more question. So, for everyone, are there things you see that give you hope that we can turn the corner on this crisis?
I think what gives me hope is the fact that, we had a Calling All Dads initiative when we had when we started Step Up to Quality. When we were coming to the table, Councilmember Brown, one of the things I saw, one of the people, we always ask this question, we have meetings, who's not in the room? Who's not in the room? Well, I didn't see black men in the room. So I raised my hand and said, we need to make sure that there are black men, because they are fathers represented in this room, and we got them out talking about early education and the importance of it. So what gives me hope is that people, grandparents and aunts and uncles, are looking for ways and opportunities to have this conversation regarding, the importance of early education. The Franklin County Commissioners, many of you know that we are building a new jail, and however, we're tearing down another jail. They're looking right now and tearing down that old jail to build a new child care center for their employees and the employees of the city that work in the municipal buildings, because I want to make sure I get it right before I get tomatoes thrown at me. But looking at it from a perspective of how can they assist in subsidizing? What would that look like for their employees? And when you are a business or when you are a government agency looking and considering my whole life, not just what you see in front of you, I am hopeful that we now, as system leaders, are looking at people as their whole life and understanding that a person, whether it's a grandparent or a new mom, has a young life to steward, and we need to assist them and equip them so they can be successful in doing that.
That's awesome, and I feel hope listening to that too. I'm going to answer that question by starting with what doesn't give me hope, what robs me of hope. What robs me of hope is, I hate to say it, but like waiting on the federal government. So I was so happy to see I'm forgetting my acronyms, what was it, the American Families Plan, introduced, and seemed like we had possibly the support to pass it. And that would have really jump-started the solutions in this community, because it would have been scholarships for 3- and 4-year-olds, like universal access to free pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, and then it would have been basically subsidies to families for 0 to 3-year-olds, so that they would not go over that 7% mark. And wow, would that have been transformative. And then I'm not even going to get started on the Republicans in Washington, but apparently Democrat Joe Manchin said that he didn't believe, what would families do with that money or something like that, like that families would buy drugs with childcare money. I don't understand it, but this bright hope I had was taken away, because I don't know where that lies in Washington, right? I don't have a lot of hope for that happening in Washington. So that's my cynical side, what robs me of hope. What brings me hope is that I do think this community doesn't have to fall prey to partisanship, and this community has solved pretty big problems before, at least supposedly very thorny problems, and I think we're up for this challenge. I think that we can have a mentality in Franklin County that they're all our kids, right? I really believe, and that's what gives me hope, that our community is different from what unfortunately we saw fall in Washington when the Biden administration tried to pass one of the most transformative pieces of legislation for American families. And I think we can do it.
So I'm going to speak to a couple of things. One is I see hope when I get a chance to talk to my childcare teams, the folks who are in the classrooms, the folks who are in the centers. They're amazing people. They change lives. They give me hope. The second thing I see hope from is when I look around this room at the colleagues that I get to work alongside. When I get to walk in the rooms arm in arm with people who understand the tactical things. We didn't talk about, I think that came up, but workforce supports, stabilizing post-COVID, supporting PFCC and top quality, increase reimbursement rates, all of those things, the experts in this room all understand them, and I get to work alongside them. So it gives me hope that we have people who know how to fix these things. And then I am very hopeful because I get the chance to work with these folks, and I'm blessed to have had a chance to work with them prior to my current role, and I know they're listening. And I know our council members are listening, and our commissioners are listening, and they're passionate about this work. Some of you might not know that Commissioner Crawley was actually a Head Start teacher at one point for the YMCA. So it is, I know folks are listening, and I also know that Tanny Crane is listening, and I know that PNC is listening, and I know that our corporate partners, I know that the partnership is listening. So I have hope when we have those people who I genuinely believe are good people with good intentions want to solve this issue, that we will figure out a solution.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. We'll move to questions from our live stream and in-person audience in just a few minutes. If you have a question, please make your way to the microphone now. If you're watching online, please type your questions into the chat. Before we take audience questions, yes, just make your way to the microphone or type it into the chat.
All right, my name is Mantra Moody again, and I am here to coordinate online questions. So our first question is from Bill Lafayette, and he believes this question could be for Joy, but it may be for all of you.
He's smarter than me, though.
Any idea how much the child care capacity in the county has declined as a result of COVID?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Does anyone have any idea how much the child care capacity in the county has declined as a result of COVID?
So I know we had several centers closed due to COVID, and I want before I quote the actual number, I want to say we had about 150 centers closed. I could be wrong about that, But as far as an actual capacity declination, I don't have that with me right now.
I have something that more than 1/3 of childcare centers are experiencing staff shortages in our community.
Yeah.
This is from Action for Children, so Eric, you can nod if I'm wrong, but 1/3 of childcare centers are experiencing staff shortages with nearly 1,000 staff openings estimated.
Yeah.
170 programs, 200 in our region, but the net closure is much less. We've had new programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the net closure is smaller, about 200 in our region, but 170 closer locally in Franklin County have closed. The net is smaller.
Yeah.
But the staff shortage number, I'm actually really interested in, that 1/3 of childcare centers are experiencing those staff shortages. Because that just means we're not
able to
getting
provide.
it out there. We're not able to serve as many people.
But we had 173 actually close across Franklin County, and that's for type A and type B. Yes.
We're at 33% less right now, serving folks, 33% less folks than we were prior to COVID.
At the Y?
Hi, I'm Mindy Wright, and I want to thank you all for the creative and thoughtful approaches that you're taking kind of on the ground in the city and the county. But I want to, at the risk of bringing people down, what are the threats that are coming statewide in terms of policy that could kind of burst our little bubble in central Ohio?
Well, I'll start, and please add. So I would say the biggest threat in the last couple years was Matt Huffman, Senate President, Lima, tried to completely get rid of star ratings, and that would totally rob us of the ability to do publicly funded childcare reimbursements. The early childhood community really rose up together to try to stop him, and they were able to, but he's still there. So Matt Huffman, wherever you are, we're watching. And frankly, the General Assembly is pretty wacky and doesn't feel that they're accountable in the way that they've clearly rigged and gerrymandered the redistricting system. So I just think the General Assembly is a threat always that we have to look out for. And I know I sound really partisan, but it's just true. Like the GOP in the General Assembly is who I'm nervous about in this conversation, and we just need to stay watchful. But then a smaller threat, if you will, but a very real one, is just the status quo right now at the state level. So we rank near the bottom as a state in income eligibility reimbursement. So the poverty, we're at 142% of poverty, 137, something like that.
142.
142% of the poverty line for being eligible for publicly funded childcare. And that is up from 2 years ago, and we're still ranked near the bottom. So I do think that one of our threats is the status quo, and actually moving we should be at 200% of federal poverty at the bare minimum. And I see Policy Matters in the back here, Will Petrick, he's done a lot of research on this and how important it is to at least get up to that in terms of state reimbursements for PFCC.
So Ohio was one of the 10 states at the very bottom as it relates to publicly funded child care from the federal poverty level of 142%. And to council members' point, just really quick, can you talk about taking away step up the quality and the star rating system? When you ask the question, how do we get here? We didn't have that in the beginning. A strong curriculum was not at the forefront, right? Some of these other things that were put into that star mandated policy or system was not at the forefront. It was basically opening, making sure you're safe. We're going to make sure we really take care of kids. And this is not to minimize what happened before. But if you take it away, then you're going to continue to set kids further and further and further behind, and we're just going to fall behind.
I would just add that, accessible, affordable, high-quality childcare is a challenge in our entire state, not just in the city of Columbus, not just in Franklin County. We were just asked by the United Way of Logan County, the United Way, the chamber, the local hospital system came together and asked us to open an early learning center in Logan County because there was a lack of accessible, affordable, high-quality childcare. It's a statewide issue, not just a city issue.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Applegate, and my company is Applegate Talent Strategies. And we recently completed a project on behalf of the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. And in fact, the Franklin County funded in part this project, Commissioner Crowley. And we were asking the question, we wanted to find out what happened to women as a result of the pandemic, particularly their employment. How did the pandemic impact their job? How did their employment change? We didn't ask the questions related to childcare, but it's probably going to be no surprise to anybody in this room that a top reason, a top challenge that these women that we spoke to expressed that is an obstacle to employment is the lack of childcare. And we know also that businesses want people to come back. We're hearing all kinds of stories about how there are jobs going unfilled. What are some options? What are some strategies or specific tactics that I can tell employers or businesses? What is it that they need to do? How can they contribute to solving or at least fixing this problem?
You know, I'm just going to say they should advocate for the same thing that their child care providers are advocating for: higher wages, sustainability, accessibility, high quality. When they join in that conversation, and you know, I'm going to shout out the business community, because child care is not just a child care issue, it is a workforce issue as well. Right? Their bottom lines are impacted. So I would say, you know, advocating, and I would also say for those businesses that don't have resources, don't know where resources are, and I was going to shout you out again, Eric, but I think I have it here. They can go to www.rise.franklincountyohio.gov, because these incentives help those families for the very thing that you're talking about. But also we need to figure out, you know, trying to incentivize and identify centers who have different hours than 9 to 5. Second and third shift is always a problem, right? So we need to make sure that we are trying to incentivize those centers to be able to provide those services for our parents as well. But you know, it's a multi-answer to the question that you asked. But I would say primarily businesses, they should join lock arm in arm with folks on this stage, our commissioners, the business, I mean, everyone in advocating for a strong early learning system.
And I would just add to that, you know, businesses can and should do as much as possible to give working parents, really including dads, because if we think of it only as a working mom's problem, it lets men off the hook, frankly. So we should think of it as, you know, giving working parents the flexibility that they need. That applies for office work, but it also applies for hourly work. Hourly workers should not be at the beck and call of, you know, like you're just always waiting on, like, you know, come in, your shift starts. Like employers have a lot of power to provide some sanity in recognizing that whole person that their employees are, and so they should do more of that. Recognizing that, you know, all work is dignified, all people have dignity, and we need to treat them like that, not like a computer. But the other thing that I have to end on is that I want employers to do everything they can, but ultimately we shouldn't have to win the boss lottery just to have access to a dignified job and childcare for our child. And that's why we need a collective solution that gets more money in so that we can, sorry, I have to say this because I think we're about to close, and I just want to be very specific that we need to increase the income eligibility for families who need the most financial support. We need to extend a modest subsidy to middle income families, and we need to eliminate the benefits cliff. Like, that's what it financially comes down to give families and children those three things that I was talking about in the beginning that we deserve, that they deserve. And in order to do that, there needs to be more money in the system. You know, we need some kind of revenue raised here locally, some kind of ballot initiative that's going to get it done, or it's not going to get done. And we're just going to keep talking about this like we are today.
Thank you to everyone in the audience who submitted their questions. I wish we had more time, but we'll turn it back over to Kelly Atkinson for concluding remarks.
All right, everyone, I hope that you all found that enlightening, but also inspiring. I love that there are also like bits of grace and hope within everything that you guys are saying too, and we can take all of that and then run with it, right? So I hope we do. All right, please make plans to join us next Wednesday for HB 616, Ohio's Don't Say Gay and Don't Mention Race bill. Thank you for today's sponsors, PNC Bank and the United Way of Central Ohio. And thank you for today's forum partner, WBNS 10 TV and the Columbus Dispatch for their support. Thank you to our online virtual seat patrons. This is the never-ending list of thank yous, you know that. All right, thank you to our online virtual seat patrons and to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch, and our special appreciation for today's speakers, the star of the shows, right? Joy Bivens, Elizabeth Brown, Tony Collins, and our host, Micah Walker. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We truly could not do it without all of you. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday as the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents another community conversation. Have a wonderful day.